Anti-government protesters. Government of Armenia supported by the 2020-2021 Armenian protests are a series of ongoing protests which began following the Nagorno-Karabakh ceasefire agreement on 10 November 2020, after Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan announced that he signed an agreement to cede Armenian-occupied territories in Azerbaijan and put an end to 6 weeks of hostilities over the Nagorno-Karabakh region. Thousands of people took to the streets, and hundreds stormed the parliament building in the capital Yerevan. Protests continued throughout November, with demonstrations in Yerevan and other cities demanding the resignation of Nikol Pashinyan. The protests have been led by two different political coalitions: the National Democratic Pole, an alliance of 16 political figures, and the Homeland Salvation Movement, an alliance of 17 opposition parties, among them the former ruling Republican Party, the largest opposition party in parliament, Prosperous Armenia, and the Armenian Revolutionary Federation. On December 3, the Homeland Salvation Movement announced former Prime Minister Uzgun Manukyan as their candidate to lead an interim government. In addition to the two opposition coalitions, numerous public figures have called on Prime Minister Pashinyan to resign, including the current president of Armenia Armen Sarkisyan, former President Levon Ter-Petrosyan, both Catholicoi of the Armenian Apostolic Church Karakintu and Aramai, and leader of the third largest party in parliament Edmund Marukyang, as well as several regional governors and mayors. In early December, the ban on mass gatherings and strikes stipulated by the martial law imposed in September was lifted. On the 22nd of December, a general strike was called that reinvigorated the protests. On the 25th of February 2021, Chief of the General Staff of the Armenian Armed Forces Onak Gasparian and more than 40 other high-ranking military officers issued a statement calling for Pashinyan's resignation, which Pashinyan denounced as an attempted military coup. During the 2020 Nagorno-Karabakh War, which began on the 27th of September 2020, Azerbaijani forces seized control of many settlements, including the strategically important city of Shusha after a 3-day-long battle. The war ended in an Azerbaijani victory on the 9th of November, and a ceasefire was signed between both parties and Russia. According to the agreement, Armenian and Azerbaijani forces will remain in their positions until Armenia returns territories it occupied surrounding Nagorno-Karabakh back to Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan will retain all territories gained during the war, and around 2,000 Russian peacekeeping forces will be deployed in the remaining territory. While the deal was widely celebrated in Azerbaijan, it was viewed as a disastrous defeat in Armenia, and some Armenians quickly took to the streets. Protesters called Prime Minister Pashinyan a traitor and demanded him to step down, nullify the peace agreement, and restart the war. On the 10th of November, when the protests erupted, there were fights as protesters tried to get over to the podium to speak and were shouted down, with some throwing bottles. Protesters also seized the parliament building by breaking a metal door, and pulled the president of the National Assembly of Armenia Ararat Mirzoyan from a car, demanding to know the whereabouts of Pashinyan. He was beaten by the protesters and later taken to hospital, where he underwent surgery and was said to be in good condition. The Prime Minister's daughter Mariam Pashinyan said on her Facebook page that the demonstrators entered the room of her younger sisters. The AFP news agency reported that the police authorities who were present did little to prevent the disorder, and people roamed the hallways of the government building, where the doors had been opened and the contents in the offices were thrown around. At about 4 o'clock, a group of approximately 40 people attempted to break into the Yerevan office of Azerbaijani, the Armenian service of Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. Executive producer Artek Hambadzumyan said that the group first shouted at the Azerbaijani officers, calling its employees Turks and traitors, and demanded that its journalists leave the country. The attackers also kicked and punched the office door, unsuccessfully trying to break in and take Azerbaijani's server. The protesters also ransacked the Open Society Foundation office in downtown Yerevan. On the same day, 6 people were detained on suspicion of organizing mass riots and calling to seize power and to overthrow the constitutional order. The Armenian Prosecutor General's office urged the citizens to refrain from organizing, holding or participating in rallies, while clashes broke out between the protesters, who were chanting, "Nikol is a traitor." Quote, and the Armenian security forces on Freedom Square in Yerevan, where 3 law enforcement officers were injured. The protesters then moved to the building of the government of Armenia. The